Like, it's not Yennefer of Vengerberg, it's Jennifer of Vergelberg.
Jennifer of Vengerberg.
Welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair, a global Witcher podcast. My name is Alyssa from GoodMorhen, and I'll be your host as you, I, and our international Hanza accompany Geralt of Rivia and his destiny, Cirilla of Cintra, across the continent. So if you guys are hearing this at the time of recording this voiceover, it is about a week and a half before this episode premieres, and I am getting my wisdom teeth out tomorrow. And if you are hearing this a week and a half later, that means for some reason I do not feel fit enough to record voiceovers just before the show premieres. I'm just recording this in advance. Maybe I'm not going to use it. Maybe I will. But if you're listening to it, I am sick as a bug on my parents' couch after having no teeth and getting my very first vaccine. So I hope that you are all in the process of getting vaccinated. I'm getting mine done the week the show comes out as well. So another reason why I might be super, super exhausted. But very excited for this episode. I will tell you, I have no idea what's in it yet. I do hope that whatever Lindsay, Charlotte, and I talk about today, that you guys enjoy it very much. And if you have joined the Patreon between last episode and this episode, unfortunately, I won't be able to get to it, but do keep a lookout for your name in the next episode, episode 34. Just want to give a huge shout out to our current patrons over on Patreon: Louise of Covier, the owner of the Churlish Porpoise, Eric Slagodling, Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob B., Julie, Ava of Gullet, B. Haven of the Edge of the World, Jacob Meeks, Charlotte from Vengerberg Glamarye, Red Kite, the Original Roach, Ariel Kitty, Dustin, Libby the Castelravello Sommelier, Claire Odell, Gennady Mendilovich, Katrin from Austria, Brett from California, Wolf, Corey from the US, and John of Riblia. If you'd like to explore becoming a patron of the show, head over to patreon.com/breakfastinbeauclair. As for this episode, Lindsay Fawn from the US, Charlotte from Vengerberg Glamarye, and I close out our discussion of Blood of Elves Chapter 2. In our mid-episode news segment, Tidings from Toussaint, Lars Witcherflix shares updates from The Witcher Season 2. Without further ado, let's conclude our discussion of Blood of Elves Chapter 2. In the last section of the chapter, Triss teaches Ciri how to approach difficult conversations with the Witchers and then also outlines additional conditions for the sorceress's stay in Kaer Morhen. At this point, we find out what Ciri had brought up to Triss. It is the fact that she has hit puberty and she has started menstruating. And she has the pleasure, as it notes, of bringing this up to the Witchers, much to their shame. And it takes her a while to get to that point in the conversation with them. Triss starts to say that, like, hey, you've got to approach this differently. Ciri is a girl. And the Witchers kind of argue with her, saying, like, oh, that shouldn't matter. She's had all these experiences. She was raised in Cintra, where the children are brought up regardless of gender, much like elves, as Vesemir says. Geralt makes an entire paragraph of all of the things that Ciri has overcome. The fall of Cintra, being part of these roving bands of refugees for months, doing manual labor at the farm where she was kept for a number of months after her time with the Druids. And then he ends that paragraph with saying, what difference does her gender make? Triss responds saying, you still ask? You dare ask that? What difference does it make? Only that the girl, not being like you, has her days and bears them exceptionally badly. And you want her to tear her lungs out on the killer and some bloody windmills. Once that realization sinks in, Triss says maybe her very first bleed happened here in Kaer Morhen, and she cried herself to sleep at night, unable to find any sympathy, consolation, or even understanding from anyone. Has any one of you given it any thought whatsoever? That's kind of a big slap in the face to them as her guardians. That is a big bombshell that Ciri drops on Triss, that Triss then conveys to the Witchers.
Yeah, wow. I wouldn't say convey is the right word. She kind of rips them a new one.
God, it's so good.
How dare you not realize this, you bumbling men? And it reminds me of a conversation that I've had recently, and I guess it's a universal thing where men really don't understand just how traumatizing it is. Not just when you're young, especially when you're young, but forever. If you don't have somebody to kind of explain to you what's happening, and I'm sure somebody has explained to her, previously that this is a thing, but maybe they haven't. We don't know. How traumatizing that must have been for her to have absolutely nobody to ask for help on, how do I take care of myself? How do I keep, just doing everyday things when this thing is happening to me? I think Triss alludes to the fact that her menstrual cycle is abnormal, because she questions whether or not the mushrooms and the juice and stuff is a reason for her menstrual problems. I'm wondering if her menstruation is particularly painful or something of that sort. But they really have no idea, I think, in general. She could tell them, on and on and on that this is bad and you can't let her exercise and you got to let her rest. But at the end of the day, they still don't really realize how big of a deal that really is.
Yeah, this is like my favorite part of the chapter, personally.
I think you requested this chapter specifically
Yes,
for
I
this
did.
part.
I did. I mean, there were a lot of great chapters to choose from, but I found that this one gave me like the most sort of like visceral emotional response. Uh, you know, the whole chapter, as you may have noticed, it brings up a lot of like personal stuff for me when I read it. When Ciri requests to be turned into a boy by Triss, this was really emotional for me personally to read because this is something that I wished as a child. I, in no way, wanted to be a girl. I felt that I had been stuck in a role that I didn't like and I didn't want to perform. I wasn't allowed to do certain things. People treated me differently. I got severely bullied for wearing boys' clothes, for presenting as a boy, for asking to be called a boy's name. Like for a while I asked to be called Charlie, but like no one would humor me, like at all. And it wasn't because I felt like I was in the wrong body or anything. It was because I couldn't deal with the limitations of the gender role. I hated it. They wouldn't pick me for certain teams because I was a girl. They didn't believe I was smart because I was a girl. They underestimated me, like my teachers, my fellow students, friends, the bullies that I had in school. The fact that I was a girl was just this like little shit cherry on top of it all. It seemed to be more of a drawback than anything else to be born a girl in this society. And like especially like the day that she's talking to Triss, like I think it's implied that that's the day that she gets her period. I don't know if it's her first period. It's difficult to kind of say. Like Triss is like maybe she experienced her first bleed here all alone. That implies that it's been happening for a while. Good God, the poor thing. What, free bleeding into her little leather pants? Like Jesus
For
Christ.
one pair.
Jesus, that's awful. Like that is, oh God.
I'm amazed that the Witchers didn't notice, like
Well, they wouldn't. How could they?
Well, they have such a keen sense of smell.
Good God. Exactly.
Like, I know that sounds kind of vulgar, but like...
I think that also speaks to how clueless they are. They probably didn't think it was anything. Like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure. So like part of me is like, okay, maybe it's been happening for a while. Maybe the day that Triss arrived was the day that it happened. And in my experience, that's how those things happen. I don't know if you guys have period horror stories. I definitely do.
Yeah.
Like from when I was a child, from when I was like 11, 12 years old. You know what I mean? Like it's a traumatic event.
It's very traumatic,
like,
yeah.
I was traumatized. I thought I was dying. I straight up thought that I was fucking dying. So that whole exchange with Triss and just being like, please, can you please just turn me into a boy? That was just like, I was like, oh, girl, I know. Like, I know, girl, I know.
Yeah. The part that resonates with me is definitely just not having someone to talk to about anything that's going on. I grew up in Catholic school, which is already like has its own connotations for sexual health and sexual education. which was really limited at the time. I, being quite tiny, ended up getting mine like a little bit later than the rest of my peers. So I did like hear some stuff anecdotally from my friends. So I was a little bit more prepared personally when I got it, but I wasn't comfortable with like talking to people who I should have been comfortable talking to this about. I did not feel comfortable asking to purchase the things that I needed in order to take care of myself. I didn't feel like I can openly talk about that stuff. So like I get that to an extent. And trying to navigate this stuff alone, even more so in Ciri's case, because it's not like she has peers. Triss even says, like, Ciri was brought up to not show signs of weakness, to not have these conversations with men, and to not burden them with that.
We've all been raised that way.
Yeah.
I was.
I was not.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Thank God. There's some hope still.
People didn't go out of their way to like make sure that these conversations were acceptable in front of men. It's just that it was never like, oh, hush, like we don't talk about that in front of men, or like it reminds me of this scene in this show called Dairy Girls. I don't know if you guys have watched it on Netflix. There's a part where she says, like, what's next? I'm going to catch her trying on my knickers. And then the mother goes, don't say knickers in front of your father. He can't cope. So, you know, it was never anything like that. So it was very normal. And I'm making a point to do that with my sons as well, to make sure that like these normal conversations happen in front of them and that they know how to respond to it. Cause, you know, they're going to grow up, they're going to get married, maybe with female partners. And when their, you know, potential wives are bleeding, I don't want them to be like, oh, don't bring that to me. I think that's just so toxic. I don't want my kids to be as clueless as these witchers are.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in this tiny little chapter with it. It comes down again to the roles of gender performance, whether or not speaking about basic bodily functions is acceptable in society. And it comes down to just like managing basic biology.
Mm-hmm.
And Triss's like rage at the ignorance of men. Oh yeah, I feel it. I feel it. I have it's a little paragraph about Sapkowski writing this particular thing about periods, basically.
Yeah, feel free to share with the class.
So I can't really say, I don't know if Sapkowski's acknowledgement of the fact that women get periods in this book really absolves him of a lot of his like male author writing female characters thing, but I'm still glad it's in there. It's like when you watch a movie and you realize that nobody has ever shown like going to the bathroom.
Or having armpit hair.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, or like dealing with the minutia of like bodily functions at all. I'm glad that he put it in there for all of the young boys reading the books who are going to be all like, what? Periods? What? I'm glad that he owns up to the fact that the men in the books are pretty fucking short-sighted when it comes to some basic ass shit like periods.
Mm-hmm.
And like if you want to associate, I'm just going to put this out there as a public service announcement. If you want to associate with women or female identifying or with people who bleed in any way, like if you want to associate with people who have periods, it's usually a good idea to understand. And these are grown-ass, sexually acted warrior monk mutants who are like 400 years old.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. How long have you lived that you don't like?
They're like a derp period, derp. You know, it's just like, what are you doing? You know, like later on in the books, he mentions that having a tampon helps save Ciri's life. Now, I'm not going to go into how that happens, but in these books, it is stated that a tampon helps save Ciri's life at some point to make a makeshift bandage, which is totally true. You can use them for that. And I was like, all right, Sapkowski, hell yeah, look at you trying, you know, like just a general public service announcement from your local angry hermit wilderness first responder. Everyone should have menstrual pads and tampons on them. Doesn't matter whether you bleed or not. You should have them on you. You should have them in your glove box. You should have them in your bag. You never know when you might be handy to dress a wound or to save someone from having an awful day.
Yeah.
That shit should be free for everyone. Public service announcement. Okay, I'm done now.
I feel like the Witcher walked so she's the man and shoving tampons up people's noses could run.
I was gonna say if that what you just said wasn't enough to convince you to carry them, I mean, score easy points with somebody. You know, you're driving in a car with your girl and you're just like, oh, you know, do you need this? that's points.
I knew someone that kept them in their apartment, just a single guy living alone,
Yes.
just because if his mother or sisters came, or if he had somebody over who needed them, they were just kind of always there, like the same way you'd have a box of tissues and other things, which shows, I think, a level of consideration, again, not just for romantic partners, but for friends, for your family members as well.
Yeah, very considerate.
As a wilderness first responder, I'm trained to take care of patients in very remote settings. Literally anything that you have on you that could potentially help somebody in a medical situation, like, I don't know, a gigantic pad of gauze, like in a sanitary wrapper. Or perhaps, I don't know, some cotton that's actually wadded up into it's like compacted and you can like unroll it and like use it. Everybody needs to carry them. Everybody needs to carry them. Everybody needs to have tampons and pads. But yeah, this whole chapter, this whole scenario, this interaction, Triss's rage at the Witchers about this is just so beautiful. And I love it. But another thing that kind of put me off, Vesemir chimes in while she's scolding the Witchers. And she's scolding them about the child's physical state, about the bruising, being battered half to death. And Vesemir is like, don't let yourself get carried away with your emotions. It's culturally acceptable for us. This is culturally acceptable for this child to be battered half to death. And, fucking idiot Geralt being like, what difference does her gender make? It's just like, I love the description of the Witchers realizing that, yes, Ciri is in fact a girl and does get a period. The only Witcher in the room that seems to have like any inkling of the gravity of the situation is Cohen. But Cohen cuts off Geralt and Vesemir and like he admits that they've been idiots. Cohen is the first of all of them to be like, oh my god, I am so sorry. And then Eskel, oh my goodness, like Eskel approaches Triss and being a perfect gentleman, comes up to her, like, what does he do? Kiss her hand? He kisses Triss's hand, like gets down on his knees, kisses her hand, and formally asks her for help. I'm like, oh, good job, Eskel. Like, yes, And when he touches, so this part I found really funny. Eskel touches Triss's hand, right? And we all know that Triss has this like ASMR tingly, sexy, fun time thing that happens when Witchers touch her. Turns out, Eskel is even more tingly than Geralt. And I'm like, girl, why are you going for Geralt still? He already taken. What about Eskel, though?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, ooh, he make you tingle even more. Ho ho. Like she's like, oh my god. She like touches her hand and she freaks out.
I think that it's so funny that he kind of is like, we need help. And just like that admission of, oh, hey, you're right. We have no idea what we're doing. And how when Triss is kind of going over those things in her head of, why am I here? What do they need help with? This was not one of those things she even considered. And so now she's like, yeah, they needed me for one thing, but holy shit, they didn't even realize that they needed help with this other thing.
Like, oh, I'm mommy now. Great. Great. I'm mommy again. Fantastic.
Yeah, like, I didn't see this coming. Nobody saw this coming. And they're all so clueless to this fact. And then they start going, oh, wait, we actually need help. Can you help us, please? So now she has to take on this whole new, unexpected role.
I envision them all just like standing there looking at the floor, shuffling their feet while Triss is just standing there with her hands on her hips, just like, for shame, you grown-ass 900-year-old motherfuckers. Like, for shame,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think just like the dressing down does get the attention that it deserves just because of the shock factor, for sure. And then there's an additional layer of it when Ciri comes downstairs and she's in a dress. It is noted that it's a little crinkled and it's clearly been stored for a while, but her hair's been done and she's acting like a princess. She starts to recite a bunch of lines that her and Triss had practiced earlier by saying that she cannot train today because she's indisposed. And then she then asks Vesemir if Triss can stay longer. And then she dismisses herself from the hall very courteously and then curtsies on the way out, leaving the Witchers even more shell-shocked.
This part is also comical because I can just see the scene, like we said before, where they probably are like yes, 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 princess, like in their heads, like okay, we'll do whatever, exactly, whatever you say, like in their heads because they just I guess they're realizing how much they effed up, passively making them feel bad about it. That wasn't her intention, but there it is, embodied what they did wrong. And so they're not gonna argue anymore. They fucked up and they're not gonna say shit about it.
Yeah, I feel like it's just that one thing that kind of gets them over the line. It's like they've gotten the dressing down from Triss, and then this is really the thing that, takes it over is just actually being confronted with having to respond back to her, back to Ciri.
Yeah, Triss is talking about this person who's been out of the room, and so it's kind of like they're a bit removed, and then the person that it's actually affecting happens to just pop in, and then it's like, oh wait, this is real. Shit just got real.
Ciri coming down in the dress is wonderful. She's wearing this blue dress from Triss, and another note that I really liked was the necklace she was wearing. So not only has she had her hair properly done, she's like, probably more comfortable now because she's probably got a pad or a tampon going on. Doesn't have to worry about that. And like she's wearing this necklace that Triss gave her. I hope to see this come into reality if it doesn't exist already. But it is a necklace made of black leather. It is a black leather viper with red ruby eyes. And I haven't seen anybody cosplay as Ciri at GoodMorhen in her dress yet. But like, I think that would be adorable. The whole I am indisposed thing, beautiful, so classy. And like, Eskel is just being a fucking gentleman the entire time. You know what I'm saying? Eskel is like, of course, milady. Like
exactly.
doing like he is behaving proper. And the whole time I'm reading this, I'm just like, oh my god, Triss, just forget Geralt and go for Eskel. Like, what are you doing? Triss really puts her foot down in this moment. And honestly, I love her for that. The chapter honestly improves my opinion of Triss as a character in general. I think they really did her wrong in the games, honestly. Like, I think they really did her wrong in the games because she is a pretty nuanced and interesting and caring character. Another note that I thought was interesting, this whole male author thing. So I'm just going off. I'm just going off on it today.
I think this chapter warrants it a little bit.
Okay, good. As long as it's like I thought it was appropriate.
I think it's funny that Triss this whole time has been thinking of Geralt. When she realizes that this is going on, her kind of mama bear instincts kind of take over, and she's not concerned with whether or not Geralt is like okay with her or appeasing Geralt or making him fall in love with her. In this moment, all she cares about is making sure that Ciri has what Ciri needs. And I think that speaks a lot to her character. She suddenly just like completely switches priorities. And this priority is definitely the more important priority.
She has control over herself.
Yeah, she stops kind of like going gaga over Geralt and realizes there's this child here that needs help, and I don't care what you people think of me. I'm going to tell you what you did wrong, and you're going to fix it, regardless of how Geralt sees her in that moment.
Which I think does, as you guys said, bode well for her as a character, at least at this point in the story and at this point in Ciri's upbringing. Before we get to the second half of the episode, we're going to hand it over to Lars from Witcher Flicks for recent news on the Netflix show. When we come back, Lindsay, Charlotte, and I will continue our discussion of Blood of Elves, Chapter 2.
Hey, it's Lars from Witcher Flicks, and this is Tidings from Toussaint. Welcome back, everybody. This is week 1 after the filming for season 2 has finally finished. Unfortunately, the last 2 weeks have been very slow when it comes to Witcher news, but it's good to know that the post-production process is now in full swing. But there's at least some tiny piece of news. A report on Deadline.com confirms that season 2 of The Witcher will be available on Netflix in the 4th quarter of 2021. This means we will have season 2 this year in October, November or December. This makes it likely that we can expect the first teaser trailer in the not so distant future, maybe already this summer. In other news, Henry Cavill has posted a video on his Instagram where he talked a little bit more about his injury on the Witcher set he suffered last year. Fortunately, he has completely recovered from it. This is what he had to say. I injured myself running on set. I was sprinting, and while sprinting the hamstring tore. My physiotherapist told me that if the tear was any more severe, it would have been a rupture, which would have been really rather nasty and taken an extraordinarily long time to recover from. Thankfully, that did not. Moreover, Redanian Intelligence talked about some new things regarding the Witcher spin-off miniseries Blood Origin, about the early history of the continent, which spans from the conjunction of the spheres to the creation of the first Witcher. The filming for the 6-episode miniseries is currently planned to take place between late July and late November 2021, with pre-production starting in May. According to Redanian Intelligence, the intention for Netflix to start the production for Season 3 of the Witcher main series was to start rather quickly after Blood Origin, so we could have a start for the filming of Season 3 in late 2021 or early 2022. In addition, Redanian Intelligence writes that another actor has joined the spin-off. Actor and director John Prophet, who was in Netflix shows such as The Last Kingdom or The Queen's Gambit, will play a mysterious character named the Severed. We will see what this role will be about. Well, that was maybe the shortest episode of Tidings from Toussaint ever. But anyway, guys, that's it for me for today. I hope you all stay safe and well. We talk again in the next episode of Breakfast in Beauclair. Until then, thanks again for listening and good luck on the path.
Hey everyone, welcome back from the break. When we left off, we discussed more of Blood of Elves Chapter 2. Ciri then leaves the hall, and Triss is then left alone with the Witchers, who, of course, reiterate their gratitude for Triss. And she sets down 3 conditions for the remainder of her stay. The last of which isn't really a condition, it's more of a warning. But the first one is that Ciri's menu is to be more varied, and the supplemental accelerants that they're giving her should be limited. So things like the mysterious salad and the blue juice. The second thing is that Ciri must not be allowed to grow wild, meaning that Ciri needs accessibility to education, peers, and the outside world. So she has to remain grounded. And Geralt responds to that by saying that he's already planned to take her to the temple school of Melilli in Alander, which we've seen throughout the Voice of Reason in The Last Wish, which is where Neneka was, or Neneke. I don't know how I said it in previous episodes anymore. The last thing, which, as I said, is more of a warning, she tells the Witchers, a little bit to their surprise, that Ciri is a source and has mediumistic powers, and the fact that she has this is very worrying. At the end of this, the chapter kind of closes with Ciri kind of running around the castle bored now that she can't train, but still kind of wanting to hang out with Triss.
So, okay, the menu thing, oh my god, getting her menu to be more varied. The point that Triss decides to, bring this down on with the Witchers specifically, I thought was hilarious. She says that the accelerants and the food that they're giving her may affect her development as a woman, and that what they're giving her will alter her hormones. And she is heavily implying that it will impede her sexual development. The Witcher's response to this, heavy implication is to stare at Triss's boobs.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, okay. Oh, I see. Don't alter her hormones or you'll mess up her boobs, apparently. All right. God, she's like, how old is she, for fuck's sake? Oh my God, Sapkowski.
I'm like, this whole thing is weird. Okay, whatever. Shuffling that aside.
Yes. Yeah. You know what I'm saying.
I think she even says at one point, I can't remember, she says something like that there are characteristics that she might resent you for if they don't happen.
Yes, exactly. If you continue giving her those mushrooms and that blue juice, she's gonna hate you because she won't have titties or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It was weird. That whole thing was okay, that was unnecessary. I get it. You're grooming her to be a sexually attractive character, but strange. Strange, Sapkowski. Okay, not surprising,
but you know what? I don't completely disagree, but I think I disagree a tiny, tiny bit. Because as far as Triss is concerned, the idea of gender roles isn't really something they discuss in the universe of so far, as far as I have read or have observed. So as far as Triss is concerned, a woman, these are things that a woman is probably going to want at some point in her life. And that's a completely reasonable thing in her mind to expect. Her feminine attributes have been things that she's used throughout her life. I think it's normal for Triss to kind of assume that Ciri is also going to want to have those things in her life.
Oh,
And if
yes.
she grows up and they stunt her and she doesn't ever grow up with those attributes and she wants to become sexual and be attractive to men and all those things that Triss assumes she's going to want, then she's going to be really mad when that doesn't happen. So I think it's a little bit reasonable for Triss to bring that specific aspect up.
No, I totally agree with you. From Triss's perspective, it's more about hormonal balance.
Mm-hmm.
But when the camera is shifted to the Witchers receiving that information,
Yeah.
that's when it gets hilarious. And it's like, come on, okay, all right. And springtime with Nenica, like that's just the idea of that is just really nice. Hearing that she's not going to be holed up in the keep, much longer than she needs to be. It's weird. It's that whole rereading a story and relating it to things in your life thing again. I feel like I've been sequestered in my house all winter, just like training in isolation for the past, year. So I'm just like, the idea of spring, green things and new developments, and Ciri is hitting puberty. She's growing up into a woman at this point. It's this nice, seasonal transition thematic thing that's going on that I just enjoy. I like it when people tie in the cycles of nature to the cycles that are happening in their stories. It's always nice when they get those layers. And Triss really hits the nail on the head about why she's there. She's tired of the Witchers fucking namby-pambying around the actual issues, which is what they've been doing. And she's just like, like, you guys don't know what you're doing. You've got a source on your hands. She's got her period. You've got a source with her period. God damn. Let her take a break. You don't want a source with PMS, like getting all up in your face with some crazy prophecies. You know what I mean? They go over some of the gifts that Triss gave to Ciri, the dress, the necklace. She also gives her a string of active jaspers, which are a type of semi-precious stone to wear around her waist to help with menstrual pain, which I thought was kind of neat. As you guys probably know, as previous listeners know, I worked at a shop that sold like metaphysical stuff for a while. And like crystal healing was something that people were really into, and it was a market that we catered to. There are belts like that exist that, they're purported to have these properties of easing menstrual pain and things like that. So I thought that was kind of neat. I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, she's got your back, like.
I'm glad you brought that up because I actually didn't know what that was. I probably could have Googled it, but in my head I imagined it was something that, like, when I think of like old-timey like period belts where they had the thing around their waist and there was like a string going down the middle and then they like put the cloths and stuff on that. That's kind of more what I imagined that was. So I'm really glad that you explained that because I had no idea that that's what that was. I just imagined, I don't know, that.
It would look more like a decorative crystal belt, basically.
Gotcha.
And if you were to see something like that in real life, it would probably be made out of rose quartz, or I don't know. Crystal healing is like a whole different subject, but yes, like people do that. People use it for that, and it works for some people for sure.
Interesting. I had an off-topic question. You said Melittle, and in my head, I've been pronouncing it Melitel.
So, yeah.
I don't know what's right.
Lindsay, welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair. We don't know how to pronounce anything for jack shit.
Yes.
Okay.
So, I think it might have been Charlotte, or it could have been someone else who made a joke about, like, Sapkowski is probably having a laugh hearing everybody pronounce all of this stuff in any nonsensical way.
Yeah, right.
I think at least in the games and in Peter Kenny's version, they say Melittle.
Yeah, it's either Melittle or like Melittle. It's Melittle or Melittle in Peter Kenny's narration.
I don't know if I can grasp onto that. I'm sorry. I don't think I can.
See, that sounds fine to me. Like Melitel sounds totally acceptable.
And you also said, how did you pronounce her name?
I've heard it said, and I've also said it in different ways. So I've heard Nenica. I've heard Neneke. Anything else, Charlotte? Am I missing any others?
I when I say it in my head, I think of Nanike. Like that's how I've kind of been Nanike.
Yeah, when I was reading, because I had physical copies of the books. My my ex took them because they were his, but I couldn't when I was reading the actual books, instead of listening to the audiobooks, in my mind I pronounced it Nenica. And then when I was listening to Peter Kenny's narration, like his pronunciations are kind of what I went with, except for the whole dandelion dandelion thing. But like
What?
but honestly,
What?
honestly, I was okay with that because I feel like it could be read both ways. It's a tomato thing. You know what I'm saying? Like it's unless you hear it straight from the author's mouth, it's really, you can just say whatever you want.
And the author has written the books in Polish, so and there's a lot of questions about the validity of the English translation. So we're working with a lot of different stacked layers against us when it comes to discussing the books.
Okay. That dandelion thing though, that's not cool. Like I'm not okay with that.
Actually. So if you're listening to this episode of the podcast, if you go back to the Hanza Holiday calendar that was done for winter 2020, on Christmas Eve, Peter Kenny actually created an entirely improvised scene between characters from the books, which I then turned into an animated storybook with the help of our friend Laura in the Netherlands, and also with additional music, of course, by Alex from Mojo Filter Media, who also does all the music for the show. Yeah, he actually addressed that slyly in this little improv scene, which was pretty fun. As another character, he just said, like, dandelion, dandelion, like, whatever you are. So it was cute.
Yeah, that was great. That was priceless. I cannot believe that he did that. Like, that blew my mind. Like,
That's so funny.
The fact that you actually were able to get him to do that.
I thought getting Doug Cockle to do something, he creates these cameos for people and they're paid, so like it's at least accessible.
Yeah.
So I knew I could do it. But getting Peter Kenny, I was expecting him to create a message the same way you, Charlotte, and I created a message, that Doug created a message. And he sent me back this file and was like, I made a thing.
It's Geralt.
And I was like, oh my God, this is great.
It's Geralt and Zoltan.
Yeah, and everybody.
Oh
but
my
it's
God.
like, oh shit, well now I have to make something that's epic enough to house this improvised scene. I can't just like put it on there the way that I did for everybody else. So when I put up Doug's on the 17th and I was like, hey, I have one more major surprise on the 24th, people were like, well, what could be bigger than Doug Cockle, who voiced Geralt in The Witcher 3? And then I was like, full improvised animated scene from Peter Kenny is pretty dope.
Oh my God.
Yeah, if you want a sample of like the type of voice acting that Peter Kenny does, Lindsay, in the books, that's a really great little, like, just a little snippet of like how he can move between those accents and characters. It's really cool.
I'm definitely going to check it out because I kind of shy away from audiobooks. I'm not a fan of, like, I don't really want to voice audiobooks. But the people who do them well and they give voices to those characters, like the guy who narrates the Harry Potter series comes to mind.
Stephen Fry.
Yes,
Incredible.
Stephen Fry. He's a genius.
Incredible.
I love Stephen Fry.
I mean, give me 20 years, I still don't think I'd be able to do something that well. So much respect for that.
Peter Kenny's in the same vein. Like, The Witcher has 100 distinct characters with specific voices. He works, with whoever's, producing the audiobook in order to, like, create different accents in different regions. And he has just this range of men's and women's voices.
That's incredible.
God, yeah, like you can tell the differences, like, between female characters even. And this is a male voice actor.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit, like, his voice for Ciri? Oh my God. Like, his dwarven accent is my favorite. It's like Scottish. That's also Scottish, I think, or something. Dandelion is like slightly more effeminate. Like, you can tell that he uses the notes from his effeminate voices in Dandelion's voice. Yennefer's voice is different than Triss. It's like, it's amazing. I can't praise him enough.
Yep. And he follows the Breakfast in Beauclair Instagram and Twitter now, so that's pretty dope.
Oh, wow.
So cool.
Look at you.
He sent me an email. I asked him for voiceover tips, and he got back to me. And I was like, oh my God.
What did he say? Share.
It was mostly, like, because my question was so vague, he gave me, like, an appropriate answer. which was just like, well, you've got to join some communities. You got to like join the right communities, and you got to get a reel under your belt. So like a demo reel
Yeah.
of like, your voice and all that. Because as I said, I've been looking into voice acting for a while, and he was just to have like one of my like voiceover favorites contact me directly at all was just like, that was a big deal. I was like, okay, thanks for the tips.
Where were we?
Triss's conditions.
Well, I think you touched on like how it ends with Ciri running around the castle and asking Triss to sleep with her. It's at this moment where Triss, I guess, reverts her attention back to Geralt, and she wants to be near him again, and he's like butchering an animal, I think, or something.
Yeah, she helps him like skin a goat or something. And she's like dealing with the stench just to be close to him.
In my notes right here, I don't know how graphic I'm allowed to be. You could take this out if it's bad, but I wrote Ciri cock blocks them. Triss
totally true.
definitely was like, I definitely want to finally, like, after all this time, maybe I can sleep in Geralt's bed tonight, maybe. And then Ciri just runs up. It's like, hey, Triss, you want to sleep? Can I sleep with your bed tonight? And she's like, oh, of course, fine. Yeah, okay.
I'm like, nah, girl, you need to be checking out Eskel, though. So is this the first time in the series that Ciri is identified as a source? I feel like, did somebody else identify her already?
Eithne might have.
Oh, yes. Okay.
In Sword of Destiny, Eithne is the queen of the Dryads. Eithne Athene has, I think, identified her as at least being different or having elder blood, which at this point we still don't totally understand what it is. We'll find out more in later chapters, but we do associate Ciri with the idea of elder blood. It also might have been Pavetta, her mother, was identified as a source in A Question of Price. But again, like, because the lore and length of the short stories is so shallow, Sapkowski never really expands on the idea up until, the series turns into novelizations. So, yeah, we still haven't really explored what that means.
Yeah, I think the show hints at it more, of course, because they have to dramatize everything. So all her little things that she does, like when they're in Cintra and like she screams and the whole like room shakes, and then we know about Pavetta in the books, but I think in the show more so they have these moments where it's clear that Ciri is magical and her magic is like strong, and it's this and that, and in the books you don't get as many, I guess, on the nose hints about that. It's very much more subtle and hinted at instead of demonstrated.
Yeah, there was one other thing I wanted to touch on that had to do with seizures and like their role in folklore and in our history. At some point, I can't remember if it's towards the end or towards the beginning of this chapter, but Sapkowski is talking about what happens during the trial of the grasses and like the violent transformations that take place when young children are subjected to it, and seizures are straight up mentioned. Guess what happens during this magical mutant transformation? Guess what they go through? They go through seizures. So it's just like this like inextricable link between seizures and like magical transformations. And it's like, I just find it fascinating, just like, from my childhood history, being like, oh, that's cool, like, oh, magical, yeah, not horrifying, and they're still horrifying, but like they're always linked, it seems.
I absolutely get where you're coming from. The horror to me is in the vulnerability of that and how traumatizing it must be for somebody to lose time or be out of control of their body where they don't really know. Like, they don't have any control of what happens to it, where it happens, when it happens. And that's so traumatizing.
Yeah.
I think we talked a little bit about cataplexy. When people talk about it, there are whole stories of women mostly, like they're scared of going into a cataplexy or having an episode in public, or like when they're with on a date or something, because they just have zero control of their body. They're worried about what's going to happen to them. And there are women who tell about like people who have taken advantage of cataplexy in really, really sad and disturbing ways. And I'm assuming that's the same for people who have those, like the seizures like you described, not the ones that are shaking and convulsing, but the ones where you're basically like frozen stiff, and the seizures all happening kind of in your head, but outside you're just kind of like frozen. It must be so traumatizing to be like that. And Ciri doesn't realize that it's happening. She was just kind of like, oh, I didn't mean to fall asleep. But if she kind of, I guess, thought about it, or somebody told her exactly what was happening, the idea of being out of control of your body is terrifying.
Well, if you ever want a firsthand experience explanation, you just let me know.
Okay, definitely.
To wrap up our conversation of Chapter 2 of Blood of Elves, we talked a little bit in the beginning about gender norms, and that really being the crux and the thesis of this chapter. Did you guys have any final thoughts on the chapter as a whole or on that theme specifically?
I'm really glad that I got to be able to discuss this chapter in particular, and I get the feeling that you guys are as well. As a standalone kind of event, it is much different to basically any other part of the book. It was very special, sad and, kind of horrifying to read, but also at the same time, very, very special to have a moment like this in a book where this just doesn't happen, where like everything else is just, violent and sad and all of that. And here's this normal slice of life I relate to so much.
Yeah, it's really intimate. It's intimate, it's traumatizing.
Looking at this chapter, and I think the next chapter as well, like Ciri's experiences at Kaer her period and any issues with the Witchers aside, there is a lot of joy in her memories at Kaer, I think. This is a place where she does feel very safe and for the most part feels very cared for. And as we had said earlier, it does lead us to a lot of opportunity to explore changes in or the loss of that sanctuary.
I feel like we've been kind of shitting on a little bit Ciri's experience here at Kaer, and we're talking about all these things that are probably so traumatizing to her. But like at the end of the day, she just wants to be near Geralt, and there are things that she wishes were different. Like, yeah, she hates having to do this with her period, and she doesn't really like getting thwomped, I don't know how she phrases it, by the windmill. But when Triss asks her, like, who are you? And then Ciri just is like, I'm a witcher. This is what Ciri wants, and she's happy here, and she loves the people that she's around. And I think having to remember that a little bit through all of the shit we're kind of giving them.
Yeah, like there's the training aspect, and at the beginning when Triss is walking into the keep and watching Ciri train, the Witchers make a point of saying like she can defend herself, and Triss is like, yes, like it's good for her. Let her wave her sword around. Let her wave her sword around. Like let her do it, because the world is a dangerous place. And like if you guys can teach her to defend herself and like keep her on her toes, then like all the better. But like for God's sake, get some pads up in this place.
Absolutely.
Like what are you doing?
That was perfectly summarized.
When I read over this chapter, there's what the author has written, and there's like how it resounds to me, like as the reader. And those are, two very, very different things. And I'm really curious how other people interpreted it. And like the fact that I get to share my perspective on it is like I really can't thank you enough, honestly.
Aww.
And I love hearing Lindsay's perspective on it and your perspective on it. Like I want to know everybody's opinion about it, like I want to know how it made you feel. Like, did it make you uncomfortable? Could you relate? Did it horrify you? Did you think it was necessary? Like what do you think? Like what does everybody else think?
Like as a man reading this, did you
Yeah.
realize that there's maybe some aspects of your personality that you should work on?
So just to put in a casual little plug, if you would like to contribute some of your thoughts to our discussion with Lindsay and Charlotte, there's a place you could do so. So you can head over to the Hanza Discord at bit.ly/the Hanza Discord, and then jump into the podcast episodes channel when this episode airs in order to have a discussion with other members of our international community about the contents of this chapter and what was said in each of these discussions. And on that note, that is it for our show today. Charlotte, Lindsay, thank you guys so much for joining me for this episode, and thank you to our Hanza for listening. So where can people find you guys? And is there anything that our community can help you with, or anything that you'd like to share with them?
So you can contact me through my website, lindsayfawn.com, lindsayfawn.com. All my contact information and my social media is there. So if you want to know anything about, getting into voice acting or joining our community or anything like that, that's exactly where you want to go.
Thank you again for having me.
Yeah, of course.
It is always a pleasure, and it's an honor to be back. You guys can find me at my website, which is glamarye.com. There are links from that website to the Etsy page where you can purchase stuff. My Instagram is also Vengerberg Glamarye, Vengerberg_Glamarye. I have a Facebook page under the same name, and you can also find me. You can now find me on Twitch under Aratuza Dropout.
And you stream Witcher every Wednesday?
Yes, I am streaming. At the moment, I am still slogging through The Witcher 1. I play The Witcher on Wednesdays. We have Witcher Wednesdays in this house. And I'm also part of the Discord community, although I'm not as active as I would like to be on it at the moment.
Lindsay is technically also part of the Discord community and has yet to comment, so maybe we'll get her in
I
there.
have a lot on my plate right now.
Yeah,
Like
I
I'm about to
understand.
go see how I can smell like Siri. I'm checking that out.
Hey.
10 out of 10 would recommend.
I got you. So I'm actually thinking of doing a second one for Siri.
Ooh.
And I'm thinking about reformulating Triss's, and I'm thinking about doing a different Siri. So I'm thinking about doing, there's like Woods Found in the Woods orphan Siri, and then there's like
Ooh.
and like those are
okay.
different.
Okay. Don't forget that as a listener of Breakfast in Beauclair, you get 10% off any purchase of Vengerberg Glamarye using code HANZA. That's HANZA.
And these bottles are cute as shit. Like, holy
She
cow.
did
Oh my
the
God.
most. She did the absolute most.
I am honestly, oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
Amazing.
Next episode, join us as we discuss Chapter 3 of Andrzej Sapkowski's Blood of Elves. Thanks for joining us at the Breakfast Table. For show notes, transcripts of each episode, and complete list of our social platforms and listening services, head over to breakfastinbbeauclair.com. Breakfast in Beauclair is created by Alyssa from GoodMorhen. It's hosted by Alyssa of the Tidings from Toussaint, music by Alyssa from Winterflakes. The show is edited by Alyssa with music from Winterfilter Media. Breakfast in Beauclair is produced by Alyssa in New York City with Louise of Covria, the owner of the Churlish Porpoise, Eric Godlin, Katie the Redhead from Toussaint, Jacob B. Julie, Ava of Gullet, B. Hibn of the Edge of the World, Jacob Meekshot from Vengerberg Glamarye, Red Kite, the original Roach, Ariel, Kitty, Dustin, Libby, Claire, Odell, Jenny Mandilovich, Katrin from Austria, Brett from California, Wolf, Corey from the US, and John of Berblia. Special thanks to Lindsay and Charlotte for joining us for this episode and our international Hanza for their support.